And I just remember one night my dad came into my room. He gave me this cardboard box, and it was like the size of, this is a podcast, so you can't see me doing it, but like, I don't know, like one of those packing boxes. And he said, we're leaving for Taiwan in a couple of days. Or so we're leaving for Canada in a couple of days. And everything you can fit in this box is what's coming with us.
On the Rise, behind the lyrics, beyond the music. Hello and welcome to this podcast dedicated to exploring incredible, emerging, and established artists in the music industry. This is On the Rise, behind the lyrics, beyond the music, and I'm Gina Lam. In this podcast, we talk to artists who share a passion for making meaningful art, a connection with Asian heritage, and a role in shaping our communities. Today, we get to dive into the music of Chynna Lewis. She is a pop R&B singer-songwriter based in Toronto, deftly weaving R&B, soulful vocals, and folk into classical pop songwriting, creating a dreamy, modern, and genre-blurring sound. That is such an incredible introduction to this artist. I am so excited to meet you, Chynna. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited too. So I was reading about your bio, and I was reading that your music weaves R&B and soulful vocals and folk into classical pop songwriting, creating this dreamy, modern genre blurring sound. I thought that sentence alone has got me so curious. It's so intriguing. I just want to know more about you. Do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Chynna. I'm a Taiwanese Canadian artist currently based in Toronto, and I'm a singer-songwriter. I play guitar, some keys, and yeah, I also teach. It's a very mixed bag of lots of musical goodness. I do some backup singing. I sing in a Motown band. Lots of different things. But yeah, here to talk about more like the artist side of things today, and songwriting and sort of the creative part of me.
That's amazing. I know a little bit about your story because I know that you moved to Canada from Taiwan when you were about 11 years old. Could you tell us a little bit about the journey of what it was like to become the musician and the artist that you are now?
It's funny that we open with this because I feel like I have quite the story for this. I recently had a really profound breakthrough in my life, specifically in therapy, where I uncovered this thing that I feel like as a person and as an artist, I've been dancing around, almost like circling, but the circling was getting closer and closer to the heart of this. And I think for a long time, I wasn't able to really even unpack it or talk about it because it was quite painful for me to be an immigrant child. It's not just like child of immigrants, it's doing the immigrating yourself and adapting to a new environment and a new country and a new everything. I didn't give it enough credence how painful and hard that was. This past year or so, I really hit a big writer's block where I found myself having a really hard time being creative, and thought maybe this might have been the end of the road for me. Like there were those types of thoughts popping in my mind, and the question that you posed, which was, moving here, that has a huge arc, like a huge tie to like why I'm doing what I'm doing. When I was 11, as you said, I moved here, and I was given very little notice. Things weren't great in my family's life back in Taiwan. They were just, without going into details, we had to go. It was kind of like, it was not a good situation to stay anymore. And my dad being Canadian, it was like, okay, well, let's leave. But for me, in my perspective, I didn't know anything what was going on. I just remember one night my dad came into my room. He gave me this cardboard box, and it was like the size of, this is a podcast, so you can't see me doing it, but like, I don't know, like one of those packing boxes. And he said, we're leaving for Taiwan in a couple of days. Or so we're leaving for Canada in a couple of days. And everything you can fit in this box is what's coming with us. And in my like 11-year-old mind, I was like, well, how am I going to fit like all my stuffies in there? You know, like it breaks my heart for my younger self to like think about that. Like, how am I going to fit my whole life into this? And around that move, my parents were selling off a lot of our furniture. And so I have these memories of people coming to our home, buying our couch, buying our like kitchen appliances, and it almost just felt like the house was getting just ravaged. And later on, what I didn't know, fast forward like probably a couple weeks later, I found myself in Canada in winter, and I have no idea like when when are we going home? Like, is this my life now? Like, I don't like it. Like, I'd like to visit here, but I miss my home. I didn't get to say goodbye to the people in my life. It was such an abrupt up and go and uproot and go. And about a month later, my parents moved us into a bigger home that we're renting. And that was the time that all of our belongings came in the moving truck. And I have this like very clear memory of the truck pulling up. It was this huge truck and the back of it opened up and the movers moved out my piano. And I was like, oh my gosh. Especially for me, like understanding now what that meant to me as a child. I had like lost my like homeland, you know. Ooh, getting emotional already. Welcome to this Pisces world. But yeah, I had lost my ancestry, my like cousins. Like I didn't even get to say goodbye to my grandma. And seeing this piano was like this last piece of home that I had left. Sometimes I think about like why I even found my way to music and how unlikely that was, because there were no musicians in my family. There was not something that was really encouraged or anything. But I realize now, looking back on it, and as I'm finding my way back to being creative again, I'm finding my why is because during those years, 11 to 18, I spent so much time at that piano. That's where I learned to express myself. That's where I learned to be soft when things were really, really hard. And like our family was really struggling and just like trying to like stay afloat. And, my parents had so much going on already that I felt such a responsibility as an older sister to help them. And so, yeah, that piano was like, I remember writing my homework at that piano. I remember like writing songs about boys. I writing songs about like friendships that didn't work out, and then the next thing you know, I find my path to music, and like I'm at Humber, I'm in school. And to say that it was a coincidence and to say it was just a career path is such an understatement, because I realize now it was like my survival. That's what I latched onto, and that's what I needed. That's what my soul needed. And so, fast forward all these years, as I'm like looking for my why again, I realize that I owe it to that kid. I owe it to that kid to like write my songs, to continue like no matter how hard it is, and speak about my joy and my grief and all of that through my music. And yeah, so I mean, I feel like I just went into this like very like long-winded deep story, but I just feel like I literally 2 weeks ago broke through to this sort of a realization. So it just feels kind of serendipitous that you're asking me that now and we're talking together now.
That's such a deep story. And I certainly, well, I never quite know what to expect in terms of a reply. We're not looking for any answers. We're asking these podcast questions. So thanks for going there. And I really appreciate it. And I know that any listeners who are listening, they're really going to appreciate that too, because it's more than, as you said, it's more than a logical and rational career choice and a decision. And when you say, okay, so now I'm getting emotional just thinking about your story, but when you're saying that music is your survival, and I'm extrapolating a little bit, but thinking that music was your way to process a lot of these emotions and your way to, overcome some of the loneliness or to make sense of what was happening, I feel like that's what would inform the best lyrics and the best messages of songs that you're presenting out so that others can relate to them too. That's the real life that you're grappling with. And understanding and packaging so that others who may not have the ability or the time or the awareness or the desire to go and unwrap that for themselves, they're able to receive this gift from you and then take it into their own lives in really powerful ways.
Mm.
So to me, that makes your music, I've heard a little bit of it, and it's incredible. And it's meaningful. And I love those themes of, stepping into who you are and self-love and mental health. And you can talk about a little bit more of that later, but I think that's what makes your music extra powerful. It's because it comes from a place that is so authentic and so genuine and so raw that other people can't help but want to listen and want to learn more. And in this way, too, I feel like it's doing everybody a service. It's doing this world a service.
Mm.
I'm going to stop talking now because I think you have so much more to say. But I guess just to wrap that little piece up is I really appreciate you for sharing that. And I didn't know it was going to go there, but I'm really glad that it went there. And yeah, just thank you. And just actually one more little thing. I can really relate to some of the things that you were saying because, I am a second generation and my parents immigrated here from Taiwan. And when they came here, they also left their parents, their family, their friends, their job, their degrees. And my father was a marine biologist and my mother was a ballerina. And when they came here, they took jobs as seamstresses and data entry clerks and research assistants. Whereas in Taiwan, they would have been ballerinas, dance teachers, professors, and they don't talk about this too much. But I can feel their humility in this world, and they just walk through life with an acceptance that to me makes them the strongest people that I know. They remind me to have this attitude of gratitude and also to know that there's a sense of resilience of the human spirit despite the challenges that we all navigate and go through. So anyhow, I want to ask about some of your songs actually because on this podcast it's called Behind the Lyrics, Beyond the Music because I think it's a really great opportunity for listeners to hear about what informs song themes, as you spoke of, but also if there are particular one or two songs that the artists want to share about. It's really exciting for us to dive into that mindset, what was happening when it was being written. Is there one song that you could talk about right now?
Yeah. Well, one of the songs I hope to be on my debut album is called Thunder. And I wrote Thunder right when I turned 30. And I remember waking up one day, like shortly after I turned 30, and I just thought, I've arrived. This is me. I don't want to doubt myself anymore. I don't want to put myself down anymore. I'm done with that. I'm awesome. It's time. Let's go. I don't care about what other people think. And it hasn't been like a straight trajectory since that revelation, but this song was about that feeling, and it was such an interesting like shift. And I think I've talked to a lot of people, and they've had that shift too as they sort of get more mature and wiser through age. And yeah, so Thunder is about, I wrote it in Banff when I did a artist residency, and it was actually after a day of trying to write. Like I think I was at it for maybe 8 hours that day, and nothing came. And normally I wouldn't even write for that long, but because I was in this residency surrounded by mountains and just inspired and free, and I was able to output a lot during that time. And so that day, on that particular day, I wasn't able to write anything that I liked. But after dinner, I thought, you know what, let me just go back to the piano and let's just maybe I'll just play something. I had no expectations of what the rest of that night was going to be. And then I wrote Thunder, and Thunder's probably one of my favorite songs I've ever written. First of all, it came to me so quickly. I finished it in an hour, which If songwriters know, it's like it could things could take years, right? Songs could take years sometimes to find the right words, and this just came to me so quickly, and I felt like I was being blessed by the muse that I'd been praying at for like hours that day, and finally it came to me. And yeah, so Thunder is about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the lyrics of this song?
Yeah. So the first verse starts the way I woke up that day. Like, I woke up the same way I always do, but something's different. You feel it too. Oh, something's changed. I'm feeling new. It's all about just almost like feeling like the wind in your hair, and like feeling like there's something behind you pushing you forward. There's like a force, like whether it's your life force or something that's just almost like glowing.
When you're singing those first lines, you woke up this morning.
Hmm.
Woke up this morning and you're feeling new. Was that it?
Yeah, woke up the same way I always do, but something's different. You feel it too.
Right. I
Yeah.
think that immediately the imagery evokes this sense of power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited when that does come out. And as soon as it comes out, we're going to make sure that our audiences can listen to that. Is there a song that you have released that we could listen to a little bit later on in the podcast that you could talk about?
So I released an EP last year. That was my first ever project that I've released. It's a 5-track EP. I'll talk about the title track, What Are Friends For? And that one I wrote during the pandemic, during the time when there was a lot of turmoil in society, social movements, and uncovering so much economic disparity. And I felt like there was myself and a very specific group of people were really grieving that during that time, and really sad during that time. But then there were a whole other group of people on my social media or that I knew of that it almost felt like that didn't touch them. But and that they had no idea that I was feeling so, not just down because of the pandemic, but down because there was so much crap going on in the world. And none of those friends checked in. And there were a couple that I was really hoping would check in. And I wrote about that disappointment of, just friendships that are more surface friendships, and ones that are just around when you're feeling good, but they kind of disappear when you're down and aren't able to go to that place with you. And to me, real friends are there during your toughest moments, the ones that you want to walk through life with, at least. And so this song, What Are Friends For, was written during that time, and then
Mhm.
released shortly after the lockdown was lifted. And so yeah, that's probably the one that people should check out.
Yeah, and it reminds me that songwriting takes so much courage because for you to be writing about these very personal experiences that audiences may be able to relate to in their own way, they're going to interpret the story and make it relevant to their own lives.
Mm.
But that songwriters and artists and authors and anybody, whoever is out there kind of presenting their opinions and their thoughts out there, that takes a lot of energy and vulnerability to be honest and get down to the root of what's happening, all those thoughts, but also a lot of courage because you'd probably imagine that those people that inspired the song are going to be listening to the song as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That ever make you think twice about writing about content, certain content? Do you pre-filter in your mind?
No, I think what came out, and if part of me hopes they heard it and considered maybe they were the people that I was writing about. And if anything, it's an understanding of what I really feel, because it's hard to go there with friends sometimes. You just want to have a good time and ask them how they're doing. So in a way, it's like kind of a little cheat code to,
Mhm.
so that they can know how I really feel and what and honestly, a lot of people hear my songs and they like my family or just friends, they're like, wow, I didn't know you had so much pain inside. I find that comment so interesting because I think we all have pain. we just process it in different ways. But it made me think maybe they don't ever see this side of me. Maybe I hold that very close to my heart and they never get to see the part of me that hurts. And maybe it's okay to show that a little bit more and normalize that a little bit more,
What an interesting path that the life of an artist takes when they're constantly looking at their feelings and making sense of the world around them. Some people would, I'm going to therapy, some people are going to the gym, or some people are going to the books or friendships or whatnot. And I find that as an artist, we're constantly looking at our emotions and wanting to overcome certain challenges and struggles and not settle for places in our spaces that don't feel like they're healthy. And they appreciate, at least in my journey, as well as a musician and a singer-songwriter, I feel that I'm constantly being pushed by myself and inspired by the people around me to do the work, keep on growing, to not settle for living with pains and hurts and traumas and in other situations that don't make me the best version of who I think I could be. I'm going to stop there, and because I really want people to hear this song. So this song is called What Are Friends For? It's from the EP, the self-produced EP, What Are Friends For? That was spotlighted on CBC Radio 1, Exclaim, as well as a number of major international Spotify playlists. So let's play this right now.
Thought you stick around. When I was going through some shit, all you had to do was call. I guess you couldn't handle it. Don't tell me you didn't know what I was going through. I know you saw my post. You have no excuse. What are friends for? If you say you'll be there, but you got better things to do. Every time I need you, you tell me you care, but I've heard that before. 'Cause you only show when I'm on time, and you ghost me when I hit the floor. Tell me what are friends for? You know me so well. When you want something from me, but you're never there to help. When I'm the one in need, don't tell me you didn't know what I was going through. And when you didn't show, I saw the real you. What are friends for? If you say you'll be there, but you got better things to do. Every time I need you,
great that we got a chance to listen to that song, China. I want to ask a question. Are you a road musician or a studio musician? If you could pick one, do you prefer the road or the studio?
I gotta say studio. I haven't done a lot of road, to be honest. It's always been mostly one-offs, and so not a lot of experience on the road. I would like to tour, but right now, I think at this point in my life, I love the studio. I love being there and just the vibe and the creativity that comes from that space. So studio.
Amazing. Could you tell us a little bit about like the day in the life of the studio? So when you're there and you've got a song, let's say you've just finished writing the song Thunder, what would that look like to take it to the studio? How would that translate from a song that's written at your piano, lyrics in a notebook or on a laptop to final production? I think that's something that people find a little bit nebulous. Like what happens from this idea to the actual production getting on a Spotify playlist?
Yeah. It that is, yeah, that's definitely worth talking about because I didn't even think about that workflow being nebulous and probably a bit of a mystery. But for me, I don't know about there's so many different types of workflow and different ways I'm sure that other people do it. But for me, because I come from like melody and song and lyrics first, I come from it from a very top down perspective. And whereas when I'm in this, so that gets established first. And going into the studio is kind of developing the bottom up perspective. So the drums, the bass, it could be keys or guitar, but just getting the foundation, the tempo of the song. Once you're locked into a tempo, you're kind of you're committed to that. And the instrumentation, and so yeah, going in first I have the song, then you go into the studio and you get bed tracks, which are drums, keys, bass, guitar, you name it, any sort of instrumental bed tracks that you need. And then from there you sort of fly those files back into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, and you can utilize modern software, and you can use your DAW to go anywhere with that. Now you can change the drum sounds, you can substitute different drum sounds, you can warp the bass, you can, I don't know, there's so many things you can do in that stage that I feel like that can be for me, that whole phase of producing the song after you've recorded the bed tracks, I find that part to be really, during the last EP, that was a really difficult part for me because it was artistic decisions all the time. Like how are we going to do this? What instrument goes here, and how loud are the vocals, and where do the Bee Gees go? How far are they panned? There were too many. So I think moving forward, I would like to have someone else drive the bus on the front of producing the song, and I would like to be there to have a say and steer the ship as well, but I wouldn't want to be the producer again. Yeah. And then from there it goes into mixing, which is just balancing the song, and then mastering, and then you send it into the internet where everyone hears the music. So yeah, that's my workflow.
I love hearing about that. The process is oftentimes 20% of it is shown to people. It's the final product, and it's the people who are up on stage that you hear and that you can applaud. But all that background stuff, even when you were talking about your work, your residency at Banff, those are the magic moments that are really special in the life of an artist. And that takes up probably about 80% of your time. And then also doing the production. And, we're not even talking about things like marketing, making sure that the music is being shared to the right networks, and applying for touring, and looking at grants, and then re-looking at themes, and on top of that, continuing to teach and, impact the lives of other artists and making sure that your own mental health is, balanced on top of that. So it's a lot of stuff. So I really liked hearing about that workflow as a producer, though, because I think it's great that you self-produced that EP, just to have that experience and that artistic say, and now all this understanding of what happens behind the scenes so that you can make the choice of how much you want to get involved with next time.
Mm.
You spoke a little bit about this as well, which is just some of the challenges of, of working as a self-producer. And I guess I wanted to ask you about the flip side, which is, what are some of the highlights and the rewards that you're finding in your music career right now?
Like thus far?
I know that as a vocalist, you've done, you've supported so many artists, like Ed Sheeran, Charlotte Day Wilson, and, you've on the Late Late Show with James Corden, the Budweiser. I mean, you've got all these accolades. You've opened for the Toronto Raptors NBA game by leading the Canadian and American national anthems on home court. I mean, there's just so many places where, Chynna Lewis has been able to shine. Are there a couple of highlights that you would say, yeah, those are really, really meaningful?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because I think the highlights for me were meeting the people that I met and doing those things, like do all those experiences that you just talked about. Those were the highlights for me. It would, because I don't think any of that would have meant anything to me if I didn't get to do it with those people, and to share the stage with such, so many different kinds of stages with these very talented and dedicated musicians has been, a highlight in my career for sure. But I would say singing for the Raptors it stands out in my mind, because that was truly terrifying. Like, not scary, like terrifying. I don't know what I expected the experience to be, but if anyone sung the American national anthem, they'll know that it's way harder than the Canadian national anthem. It's way rangier. And for me, I have to start on a G or a G flat. Otherwise, like the high parts are too high and the low parts are too low, right? It just gets crazy if you start somewhere wrong. So when I did it, I remember being in the room before the game started, and all of a sudden, like, thousands of people are filing into the stadium. And I was like, oh my God, what did I sign up for? I mean, after the fact, I heard that a lot of singers specifically don't do anthems because it's so terrifying, and that makes perfect sense to me. But I just remember, like, the space being so there was such a chaotic atmosphere. There was fire shooting out of like the hoop things, and there's this music, and it was like, it just, this built up of like and it got crazier and crazier, and then dead silent. They were like, and leading the national anthems, Chynna Lewis. And then it was like just me standing in the middle of that court around these like giant NBA players, and I felt like I lost control of my hands, and it was totally muscle memory that kicked in, because I remember not having any feelings in my hand. It was just like pins and needles, and I had such a hard time taking a deep breath. And I've sung so many times in different, like, I've never imagined that this it would rock me physically like this. And yeah, I did it. It was fine. I think I did well. But would do again. But wow, that was scary.
That's incredible. I was thinking that you were going to say it was terrifying because then they made you shoot a three-pointer or something.
Oh boy.
That's way harder.
I would have missed and never worked in this town again.
That's amazing though. I love how music takes us in so many different directions. Like
Yeah.
on the one hand, you can be playing to an intimate audience, of 20. And then on the other hand, you can be singing the national anthem for crowds of thousands.
Yeah.
Huge sporting event. And that's really exciting. I am really curious about, this next journey. You're coming out with a new album. What's sort of the hope for you, I guess? Like, are you hoping to get onto the road, or are there more songs kind of brewing? So you just know that you just want to keep on writing. You mentioned about teaching. Like, what kind of is guiding you in your next steps?
I think for me, artistically, I would like to, in the next couple of years, have a body of work that I'm really proud of. Not to say I wasn't proud of the EP, but I still really feel like I'm in this very experimental phase of finding my sound and my voice and my style and my lyrics, and I'm just letting myself take that time to figure it out. And so, you know, but at the end, I hope by the end of that next chapter, I have a body of work that I feel, that I could play for a really long time, and play again and again for the shows to come, and potentially tour, in Taiwan, or, in different parts of the world, and festivals, and yeah, go on the road with some musicians and some friends, and do that whole thing. So yeah, that's definitely a big goal of mine.
China, do you sing in Mandarin as well, or in Taiwanese?
I don't, I mean, I know songs in Mandarin just from like childhood and my mom singing and stuff, but I don't write in Mandarin. I would like to experiment with that. That's something that's in the clouds, sort of floating around, but not, I haven't sort of pulled it down and put it into action yet. So, but that's a someday thing, hopefully.
Yeah, and I love how there's such an evolution of musicians. So coming out with that EP was really a mark of that time and your ideas and that creativity then. And whatever body of work you're coming out with next, that's kind of the next evolution, the next iteration of where your music is. And it would be neat to imagine what it would look like even further on. For myself too, I've kind of started in one particular genre and then I moved into a different genre. And I sort of realized, oh, I might actually be at that point where I have to venture a little bit further. It's feeling not as relatable as it did 5 or 6 years ago. And that for me, that feeling is really scary actually, because with the sound that I've crafted that people seem to resonate with or associate with me. And so for me to then go on and say, oh, I'm going to shift that and change that, I've got all these questions of, well, will it be acceptable? Will it be relatable? Will people like it? But I love what you're saying about that isn't really the point. It's the process and that journey of just being able to write down what you're wanting to be your real truth at that moment in present time. And hope those truths are going to be so real that they're going to last that test of time. It's going to be timeless.
I
Anyway,
love
so
that. I love that because it's like we as humans, we evolve. Like, I'm not the same as I was when I was 20. So, you evolving into this new genre makes sense because you're becoming someone new. You're stepping into a new chapter, and it makes sense that your sound would change with you. But I get that fear of like, oh, but this is who I was, and how are people gonna react to that? I have those thoughts too.
And you know what's interesting? And I wonder if this ties back into the culture of like our Asian culture or ideas that people have in society or ideas that I've even put on myself. But sometimes I find the most fearful thing is doing all the change and the work on a platform. Because I get that people are constantly growing and pushing themselves, and I expect that the people in my life are not going to be the same as they were a year and a half ago, 2 years, 5 years ago. I would expect that. And in fact, if they were the same person, I'd have questions. I'm like, what kind of work have you been doing? I mean,
Absolutely.
and so I think sometimes for me that thought is I don't mind doing that work, but to have it all done in a place where people can see all those changes and you don't know where you're going to end up, that part can kind of rattle me up a little bit. And I think about for myself actually how it ties into my Asian culture and how there is a lot stability is something that was really admired and predictability is praised, and also following a very standard path is safe and comfortable. And it's a way of showing that you love the people who are in your life, to not worry them,
Mhm.
by giving them a sense of a plan in your own life, you're gifting with this uh, comfort.
Yeah.
And I wonder, does that kind of, is that
That
how does,
resonates. That resonates so hard, because I know, my parents, they wouldn't say that they're worried about me, but I think when they see the ups and downs that I go through, they're worried that, about that instability and about what the future holds and how are you going to have a family and how are you going to do all these things that you want to do. And uh yeah, it's definitely, there's a part of me that just wants to be even Steven all the time for them, just be healthy and be okay. Not that I'm like that's a weird way of putting it, but I just want them, I want to be able to provide for them and do all these things, but I also happen to be in a career where financially I'm not as well off as they are. So there's always that feeling of guilt of, maybe, what am I when I wish I was taking care of you instead of the other way around. And um yeah, so I definitely really resonate with that gifting them with that stability. And but even yes, turning away from that and saying no, I have to walk my path, and I trying to see the bravery in that. And
Mhm.
yeah, more than anything, instead of feeling the guilt. And um yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat way to know that the theme of family is so strong in a lot of music, but particularly in, cultures where these kinds of thoughts are and more important.
Mm.
And, I think sometimes it even trickles into, other relationships in life, because definitely wanting to do things for the family is like a big motivator. But secondly, I think that that idea that you live under other people's expectations can trickle out into all the relationships, at least for myself, all the relationships I have in my life. I kind of bring this thought process and impose it on everybody else, imagining that they all have expectations on me that I may or
Mm.
may not be able to fulfill. So it's neat because I think it starts kind of with a family value, which is really positive actually to think about family, but sometimes it can really trickle out and be a little bit harmful and restricting, because I start to imagine that the worldview is consistent for other people in my life where it's not. At the point, I think it's nice to know, yeah, we're all kind of walking our path. And in fact, everybody's so busy and tied up with their own lives and their own issues and their own, things that they're going through and their own joys and happiness, that they're probably not going to, they're not thinking about what other people are doing in their lives. So
Mm.
that's something that, can be laid to rest. So this podcast really brings in artists that share this commonality in not only music and creativity and the sense of being part of the community, giving back to the community, but also Asian heritage.
Mhm.
And you've shared a lot about that kind of in your earlier story, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that. Like, do you see your Asian heritage being something that you particularly want to bring out in your music, or do you see your Asian roots being something that's really important in your artist path?
Yeah, I think I would just like to be like another Asian Canadian artist archetype, you know, not necessarily something that's already there, or, not any sort of formula. Just, I think just by being me and telling my story in my own way, I hope, that it'll resonate with, people who look like us, but also who have gone through similar journeys and feel like they can't share or feel like they're alone, or there's any amount of shame wrapped up in having to sort of dim or hide any parts of themselves, to fit into the world that they live in. And so I just hope that just by me being myself and going forth in this artistic journey, that it inspires other, particularly for me. Like, I think about my niece, I think about my 6-year-old niece who really looks up to me. She loves singing. And so I think about her a lot and her generation, and, you know, the kids are watching. So I hope that a strong Taiwanese Canadian female artist killing it will inspire them to do their own thing too, you know? That's my hope. That's why I want to do it.
That's so powerful. I love that. I'm going to make sure that everybody I know is listening to your music. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on this podcast, Chynna. Again, for those of you who are listening, this is Chynna Lewis. She's a pop R&B singer-songwriter based in Toronto, and she's weaving her soulful vocals and folk into classic pop songwriting. She's got a EP out that was released called What Are Friends For? And she's currently working on her sophomore full-length album, which is set to be released in the spring of 2024. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, On the Rise, Behind the Lyrics, Beyond the Music. This was Chynna Lewis. I'm Gina Lam, and we look forward to the next episode.